Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله تعالى في القرآن الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سيقول السفهاء من الناس ما ولاهم عن قبلتهم التي كانوا عليها قل لله المشرق والمغرب يهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم صدق الله العظيم قال الله تعالى في القرآن الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولله المشرق والمغرب فأينما تولوا فثم وجه الله إن الله واسع عليم صدق الله العظيم. The first verse which I recited there from Surah Baqarah, in fact it's more than one verse, is as follows. The fools among people will say, what has turned them from their Qibla, which they had, which they were following? Say to them, the east and the west belong to Allah. He guides whom He pleases to the right path. And that is in Surah Baqarah. It's around verse 142, I think. And the second one, which I recited, is also in Surah Baqarah, but is a little earlier. And that translates as follows. And Allah's is the east and the west. So whichever way you turn, that way is Allah's purpose. Surely Allah is ample giving, knowing. And that is Surah Baqarah, as I said, a little earlier than the verse which I read before. And that is verse 115. In last week's khutbah, I read a verse from a group of verses in Surah Baqarah, which instructed Muslims to say their prayers facing the Kaaba at Makkah, whereas previously they prayed facing Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was the center of the prophets of the Israelites, the Bani Israel, all prophets that Muslims believed in. And the first verse which I've read just now is the first in that group of verses. And the making of this change of Qibla was raised as an objection by the opponents of the Muslims at that time to ridicule them. And this was their objection in these words: what has turned them away from the Qibla which they had, the direction of prayer which they used to follow? And some Muslims hold the opinion, commentators hold the opinion, that what they mean by this objection is, how can Muslims turn away from facing a place which they themselves used to face previously? What has gone wrong with that place now? And another opinion is that when in this objection, when they said what has turned them away from their Qibla which they had, what the objector means is that their Qibla was actually in Makkah. And so the opponents are saying, why have you left your Qibla at Makkah and emigrated to Medina? So whatever might be the actual nature of the objection, the answer that is given here to that objection in the Holy Quran is that the East and the West belong to Allah. And as you heard, it's given in two verses. Lillahil mashriqu wal maghrib. In both the verses which I read, belong to Allah. And that means that there is no place on earth which is not Allah's. Whether it is Makkah or Medina or Jerusalem or anywhere else in the world, it all belongs to Allah. And the Holy Quran in another chapter says this to the Muslims: Ya ibadi yallazina amanu inna arzi wasiatun fa iyaya fabudun. O my servants who believe, in other words, the Muslims, surely my earth is vast. Allah here calls the earth my earth. Inna arzi. Surely my earth is vast. So serve me, so worship me. And this is chapter 29, Surah Al-Ankabut, verse 56. So the one God can be served from anywhere on earth. And there is also a hadith in which the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, the whole earth, the whole of the earth has been made a mosque for me. And this is in Sahih Muslim and in some other collections as well. So any place on earth can be as holy as any other place for saying prayers. The sacredness of a place comes from the sincerity and devotion in people's hearts who are gathered there. And that feeling may be increased if you are in certain places, if you're in places which are associated with devoted people, whether they are in the present or in the past. With devoted people, whether they are in the present or in the past. And before going further, I should have said this at the beginning, that I would like to welcome those people who have come to our center in Darussalam, Wembley today for this Friday Khutba and prayers. Thank you very much. Now, apart from any place on earth being a place where you can pray, any place on earth can also qualify as the direction of prayer. And this is stated in the second verse, which I read, that the east and the west belong to Allah. So whichever way you turn to face, in that direction lies Allah's purpose. And this verse, as I said earlier, it occurs a few verses earlier than the group of verses which deal with the change in the Qibla. And therefore, this verse is like an introduction to that subject. Now, in these words, in whichever direction you turn, in that direction is Allah's purpose. The word translated as purpose here is wajh. And the word wajha means face, as well as a course meaning the way you go, a course or purpose that you are following, or a direction in which you are going, or in which you are looking. So what this means is, whichever way you turn, that way is Allah's wajh, that way is Allah's purpose. It means that in whichever direction a person turns, he or she will come face to face with Allah. And it's not only in any physical direction that we turn, that there is Allah in that direction, but whichever path of life a person takes in this world, that is also a direction you are turning in. Whichever path of life a person takes in this world, along that path, he can fulfill the purpose for which Allah created him. Now, facing a certain direction in prayer by your body is just a way of indicating the teachings which you are following. Now, while at Makkah, before Hijrah, Muslims faced towards Jerusalem, and this may be because they did not want to condone in any way idol worship, because in the Kaaba there were many idols, and because Jerusalem represented those prophets who had taught that God is one. Now at Medina, Allah's command to Muslims to turn towards Makkah, the Kaaba in Makkah, for prayer, that may have been because they were now very far from the idols in the Kaaba. They could no longer see those idols. And also, within 8 years, they were going to conquer Makkah and restore the Kaaba to what Abraham had originally built it for the worship of one God. So that would be the reason why this change of direction took place. Now, last week, I also commented on a verse in which God addresses all humanity and people of all religions. And the last part of that verse, addressing everyone in the world, was vie with one another in good works. In other words, try to outdo each other in good works. Fastabikul khairat. To Allah you will all return, and then He will inform you, He will let you know about the things in which you differed. And this is chapter 5, Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 48. And the meaning is generally taken to be that all humanity will be gathered before Allah on the day of judgment. You will return to Allah on the day of judgment. And then they will find out there, after having left this world, about the differences in beliefs which different groups had, and whose beliefs were right and whose beliefs were wrong. But this returning and gathering before Allah does not need to be only after death on the day of judgment. This verse may be indicating that a time will come in this world when all humans will be brought together by Allah, and they will then know about the matters in which they differed. They will then know which beliefs were right and which beliefs were wrong. And so this is a prophecy that humanity will become united in following the religion of Islam when it says you will return to Allah. Humanity will be united in following the religion of Islam. And how it will happen is when various sections of humanity all try to excel each other, outdo each other in doing good and charitable works. And then they will find out that it is Islamic teachings which lead people to do the most good. Now, that's very easy to say. Of course, it does not look like that now. Do people looking around the world say it's Islamic teachings which lead people to do the most good and charitable works of all on earth? It doesn't look like that now. In fact, at present, it is mainly non-Muslims who are at the forefront of doing good and charitable works, these works of khairat, fastabikul khairat, get ahead of each other in doing good. It's generally non-Muslims who are leading that. But if Muslims start deploying all the zeal and fervor which they show for conducting jihad, that we want to do jihad, we want to do jihad, all the zeal and fervor which they show for conducting jihad and for defending the honor of Islam through demonstrations and protests, etc. If they deploy all that energy towards acts of goodness for humanity in general, when they do that, then the world will see that Muslims following Islamic teachings will excel all others in this work. And there's another verse in the Holy Quran which states that all religions have similar principles and similar goals. And this is a well-known verse again in Surah Baqarah, which I will read in translation. Surely those who believe, in other words, Muslims, surely those who believe and those who are Jews and the Christians and the Sabians. The Sabians were another religion in between Jews and Christians in Arabia at that time. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day and does good, they will have reward from their Lord, and there is no fear for them, nor shall they grieve. So this is chapter 2, verse 62. And regarding this verse, people ask this question, that if followers of religions before Islam, like Jews and Christians, can get to God, can receive Allah's approval, can receive what is called salvation, and this is what these words refer to, La khawfun alayhim wala hum yahzanun, that there is no fear for them for the future. Their future, spiritual future is secure, nor shall they grieve. They won't be grieving for anything they did in the past, because they will have changed their lives and repented for their sins. So if this can happen to Jews, Christians, and other religions before Islam, as stated in this verse, then why was it necessary to Islam to come into the world? And why is it necessary for Islam to ask people, to invite people to become Muslims, to accept it? And the reason is, the answer to this is that what this verse means is that if a person is to reach this stage where he is accepted by God as following the right path, as having no fear, no grieving, it is necessary for him or her to follow certain principles. If anyone wants to reach this stage, it cannot be reached by merely calling yourself Muslim, Jew, or Christian. All of these, Muslim, Jew, or Christian, all of these actually made this claim, Muslims, Jews, and Christians, that just by calling ourselves by these names, we are now the accepted people of God. So what this verse says is that those who believe, those who are Jews, those who are Christians, those Sabians, it goes on to say, in fact, whoever believes in Allah and the last day and does good, that you have to follow these principles, which all of you accept. All the groups, religious groups mentioned here, accept belief in God, belief in the last day, and the need to do good in practice. So what the Holy Quran is saying is that it's then the duty of the followers of the early religions, such as Jews and Christians, to try to see where they can find belief in God and the last day and the doing of good, where they can find these principles in their most perfect form. And what is the way to act on them in the best possible way? Where are the teachings which lead us to follow these beliefs and practices in the best possible way? And to whatever degree people follow these principles, whoever those people might be, it's to do with the degree to which you follow these principles, whether you are Muslims, Jews, or Christians. It is to that extent that they become the accepted people of God. Now, if someone believes in God, but also believes that God is the God of my religion, he has chosen my race, my religion, my tribe as his favorite, no matter what we do. Now, if someone has that concept of God before him, then he will not be able to do good to people of other nations and other religions, because he regards them as rejected by God. So that concept of God, he believes in God, all right, but it doesn't, because the concept is defective, so it can't lead him to the doing of good as much as if his concept was correct. Now, if there is someone who believes in the last day, but also believes that my sins have already been forgiven because of the religion to which I belong. I am Muslim, I have no fear on the day of judgment. I am Jew, I have no fear on the day of judgment. I'm Christian, I have no fear on the day of judgment as to what will happen. Then your belief in the day of judgment is then undermined. Your belief in the day of judgment then doesn't act as a deterrent to stop you from wrongdoing and to encourage you to do good to others, because you believe that no matter what you do, you'll be forgiven on the day of judgment. So what this verse teaches is that it is only the principles which various religions have in common. It is only those principles which lead to someone becoming accepted by Allah. But if you want to know those principles and follow them in the best possible way, then you have to have the right concepts about those principles. And those right concepts are what the Holy Quran claims to present. And There is another verse again in Surah Baqarah, which is like this one. It says this. It says that the Jews and the Christians for themselves, each for themselves, they say, no one shall enter Jannah, no one shall enter the garden except ourselves. Each of them says that about themselves. And the Holy Quran says, these are their vain desires. Vain desires means only wishful thinking based on selfish desires, not on any reason or logic. It says, the Holy Quran says, these are their vain desires. You have no proof of this. And then the Holy Quran goes on to say this in answer to this. No, it says no. Anyone who submits himself entirely to Allah and he is the doer of good to others, Mohsin, he is the doer of good to others, he or she is the one who has reward from the Lord, and there is no fear for such a person, nor shall they grieve. So when the Holy Quran says that the Jews and the Christians, and it applies to others as well, of other earlier religions, that they are wrong in saying that only they will enter the Garden of Heaven. When it says they are wrong, it doesn't then go on to say, no, they are wrong, only Muslims will enter the Jannah. It does not say that. It says only those who follow certain principles. And again, those principles are mentioned, that whoever submits himself wholly and entirely to Allah, and he is the doer of good to others, Mohsin. So when here the Holy Quran says, anyone who submits himself entirely to Allah. Well, someone once said to me, it's talking about Muslims there. So the Holy Quran is saying only Muslims will go to heaven. And I said, no, it doesn't here say Muslim. It says whoever submits himself entirely to Allah. And the Quran could have used the word Muslim. Muslim means a person who follows Islam. But instead, it has used not the name Muslim, but an action, the action of submitting. And not only just submitting, but entirely. Whoever submits himself entirely to Allah. And the word for entirely here, again, is that Arabic word which I discussed earlier, wajh. That whoever submits his wajh to Allah, that is what is required. Now, this word, as I said, means face, but it is used to mean your whole self, the entirety of you. And you can easily see why the word face should mean the whole person, because that's what we do, isn't it? We look at people's faces, and their face represents to us, like in your passport or driving license photograph, that face is the whole person. So when this is why the word wajh in Arabic, which means face, also means the whole person. So whoever submits his whole person to Allah, and there is the doer of good to others, such are the people, the Holy Quran says, who will be accepted by Allah. And in fact, the same principle is actually taught in the Bible as well. When Jesus was asked, it says in the Gospels, when Jesus was asked by someone, what is the first commandment of all? The main basic commandment of religion. And Jesus replied, the first commandment is that the Lord our God is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment. And Jesus went on to say, the second commandment is, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, like he is one of you. So to love God with all your heart, mind, strength, etc., is the same as what the Holy Quran is saying. Whoever submits himself entirely and wholly to Allah. And this love of neighbor, the second commandment, is, as mentioned by Jesus, is the same as what the Holy Quran says here, being a muhsin, being a doer of good, to being a benefactor of other people. And as Jesus indicates here, he is only repeating the commandments which were taught by prophets before him. So may Allah enable all of us to act on these commandments and to urge our fellow Muslims and also all our fellow human beings in general to do the same. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quran al-Azim wa nafa'na wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim. Innahu ta'ala jawadun karimun malikum barurufur rahim. Alhamdulillah. نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. And we pray that ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتوب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. After the Friday prayers, we'll have the namaz-e-janaza for Sheikh Waqar Ahmad. So I conclude this khutbah with Ibadallahi rahmakumullah, inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i zil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'izukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Uzkurullaha yazkurkum waduhu yastajib lakum wa la zikrullahi ta'ala akbar. Wallahu ya'lamu ma tasna'un. So now the 2 rak'ah Jummah Farz prayers.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala-salah, hayya ala-falah, qad qamat as-salah, qad qamat as-salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal lazina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Alam nashrah laka sadraka wa wada'na anka wizraka allazi anqadha dhahraka wa rafa'na laka dhikrak. Wa innamal usri yusra, innamal usri yusra. Wa idha faragta fansab wa ila rabbika farghab. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. Sami Allahu liman hamidah. Hamdan katsiran tayyiban mubarak. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. Rabbi ighfir li warhamni. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alaihim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدعو اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين. ويل للمصلين الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون الذين هم يراءون ويمنعون الماعون. الله أكبر. سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا. الله أكبر. سبحان الله. الله أكبر. رب اغفر لي وارحمني. الله أكبر. سبحان الله. الله أكبر. التحيات. أشهد أن لا اللهم صل على محمد. السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ. السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ. اللہم انت السلام ومنک السلام تبارک ربنا وتعالی یا ذا الجلال والاکرام. استغفر اللہ ربی من کل ذنب واتوب الیہ. رب اغفر وارحم وانت خیر الراحمین. یا حی یا قیوم وبرحمتک استغیث وبرحمتک یا رب العالمین. So as I said before the Jummah prayer, we'll now have the Janaza prayer for Sheikh Waqar Ahmad Sahib of Sialkot in Pakistan, who died about 4 days ago in Lahore. And he was brother-in-law of Captain Nadeem Sahib, whom we often see in our center when he's visiting the United Kingdom. So we'll have his Janaza prayers. They were said in Lahore on Tuesday. And as you know, the Janaza prayer is said in the standing posture. And the Imam says, Allahu Akbar. And then silently, you all begin the prayer as normal up to the end of Fatiha. Then the Imam says, Allahu Akbar. And again, everyone silently says the Durood. Then the Imam says loudly again, Allahu Akbar. And we say some prayers for the forgiveness of the deceased and the living ones. This can be any prayer in your own selection, in your own language, or the set Masnoon prayer. And then the Imam says Allahu Akbar loudly the 4th time, and then the Salam, and it concludes. So I will start that now. Allahu Akbar. Subhanak Allahumma. La ilaha illallah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Allahu Akbar. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin. Allahu Akbar. Allahumma ighfir lahayyina wa mayyitana. Allahu Akbar. Allahumma ighfir lahayyina wa mayyitana. Sayyidina wa sayyidina. Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So thank you very much for joining us again this week. And inshallah, we'll gather again, all being well, next week in the same way. And thank you again to those who undertook the trouble to assemble at our center in Darussalam, Wembley. Our greetings to them, and may Allah accept your prayers and efforts, and our prayers and our efforts. So thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.